pistols, prayer, and potluck. This is Armed Lutheran Radio.
Hey folks, welcome to another episode of Armed Lutheran Radio, a show about guns, hunting, competitive shooting, the natural right of self-defense, and what God's Word says about the issues surrounding gun rights and gun ownership. I'm your host, Lloyd Bailey, the Armed Lutheran, and this is episode number 358. Thank you so much for making Armed Lutheran Radio a part of your week this week. My apologies for this not being episode 359. This was supposed to have happened last weekend, but Pastor Bennett and I had we had a show all planned out. We had picked out a cool topic, and then Friday happened, and everything went sideways. More on that in a moment, but before we get to that, I want to thank all the members of the Reformation Gun Club, the men and women who make this show possible, thanks to their annual and monthly contributions. This week's shout out goes out to Mark from St. Paul, Minnesota, Matthew from Nixa, Missouri, Paul from Sheridan, Wyoming, Kurt from Rialto, California, Ethan from Auburn, Indiana, Brian from Riverton, Wyoming, Drew from Excelsior Springs, Missouri, Ron from Lexington Park, Maryland, Mitch from Stockbridge, Michigan, and Russell from Trenton, North Carolina. Thank you all so much for your support. Thank you to all of the members of the Reformation Gun Club. Folks, Armed Lutheran Radio is listener funded. That means that you're not going to hear any advertising. You're not going to hear any sponsors on this program. We rely on these good people and many more to help keep the lights on and keep us doing what we do. If you would like to find out more, check out the we've combined the gun club content. All that information is now on the website, but if you go to armedlutheran.us/gun club, that will take you to the gun club page. There's hundreds of hours of exclusive content available, some cool Armed Lutheran swag, invitations to our monthly online hangouts. We've got to do an April hangout, and I've got to figure out when that's going to be. May try to squeeze that in next week since, well, next week is the final week of the month, so we've got the April hangout still to do. We'll try to get that done next week. More on that in the coming days. Before we get started, though, I do want to make a couple of announcements real quick, just a couple of reminders. First off, the big 33% off t-shirt sale that we have at the Armed Lutheran shop is still going through the end of April. You still have time to save. Just use promo code EASTER at checkout. All of our cool t-shirt designs are on sale, plus a couple of new ones. So check all that out at armedlutheran.us/t-shirts. That's the letter T, shirts, or just go to armedlutheran.us/store and you'll see all of it there. Also, be sure to check out the newest books. First off, Duty to Defend Volume 2, which is the biggie, which was released late last year. It's an awesome collection. If you don't know what it is, if you've never heard of it, it's an awesome collection of articles debunking the incorrect usage of Bible verses in defense of gun control, and in some cases in defense of gun rights, but mostly gun control. There are 20 pastors with somewhere around 400 years of combined experience preaching and teaching God's Word who've contributed to this awesome book, including our own Pastor John Bennett, the Reverend Jason Reed, Paul Kane, Tyrell Bramwell, Tab Ottmers, my pastor Clint Stark, my former pastor Ralph Abernathy, Brian Wolfmueller, Evan Gegline, many more. Check that all out at armedlutheran.us/duty. Signed copies are still available. And lastly, my new book, The Fifth Command, is available, and I would encourage you to check that out as well, especially if you have young readers in your family who are fans of fantasy adventure. It is a fantasy work of fiction featuring a bard, a cleric, a dwarven prince, and an elf huntress who may or may not be inspired in part by the cast of a certain podcast. It is a fun adventure for readers, I'd say 12 and up. Lots of lessons on faith and friendship and sacrifice, self-defense, love of neighbor, and lots more. Plus, there is a downloadable reading guide available so that you can read along with your kids and discuss the issues and the biblical parallels that are raised in the book. Signed copies are available at armedlutheran.us/books. Both books, by the way, are available in print or electronic formats, either from Amazon or at the Armed Lutheran shop at armedlutheran.us/store. Okay, now that all that is finally out of the way, let's get to the reason that you're hearing episode 358 this week, and you're only hearing me and not me and the Padre. The simple answer is that last week was insane. As I said earlier, Pastor Bennett and I had this episode all planned out for last weekend. We found a video of a pastor preaching the gospel of gun control on Palm Sunday of this year, and we're all set to dissect it. But then, as I said, things went sideways. I got a call from my son telling me that he had received a call from my wife's stepfather. Apparently, he had had some issues getting through to me or my wife. I don't know whether he lost the numbers, he changed phones, and when he called me, apparently I did not recognize his number. I think it had changed, or I'd lost the contact when I changed phone plans. Long story short, my mother-in-law was in the hospital after having a series of seizures, and the last of which apparently her husband could not wake her from, so he called 911. So I relayed this news to my wife, who promptly called her mom at the hospital. She could only apparently, I don't know whether there's something wrong with her phone, but she was able to get through on Facebook Messenger, so it was a video call. Now here comes the traumatic part. For some reason, she could not get this phone call. And like I said, my wife was on Facebook Messenger and they were on camera face to face. My mother-in-law was in a hospital room and her husband had stepped down the hall for a moment and there were no nurses in the room and no other patients. And in the middle of the call, she started having a seizure and we watched it on screen. And it was terrifying. Needless to say, my wife was hysterical. Her mother would not respond. My wife was screaming, trying to get somebody to hear, but there was nobody in the room. And so I got the number to the hospital and called the front desk to get them to rush somebody to her room. And then my wife had to watch as a team of doctors and nurses struggled to wake her up, and which she never did during the call. And basically we thought we were watching her die. It was pretty horrible and terrifying. And here we were watching all of this 1,000 miles away, unable really to do anything to help. So I booked a last minute flight for the next morning, got up at 4:30, drove my wife to the airport, came back, took a quick nap, took my daughter to school, and then spent the next 3 days playing Mr. Mom, basically. If you don't know that cultural reference, go watch the movie Mr. Mom with Michael Keaton. It's worth the time. My wife ended up spending 6 hours en route to Charlotte, what should have been about a 2.5 hour flight, thanks to a 2-hour layover in Chicago. Got a rental car, drove another hour to the hospital, and then spent the next 3 nights in a recliner in the hospital room. So that prompted the cancellation of that. All of that happening late Thursday night prompted the cancellation of our recording plans for last week. And then this week I picked I picked my wife up early on Monday, spent the rest of this past week trying to get caught up. Then volleyball practice and choir concert and more Mr. Mom time, while my wife was basically catching up on 4 days with very little sleep. So, first off, thank you to all of you who sent your prayers and well wishes. We certainly appreciate it. My mother-in-law is doing much better. It turned out to be a medication issue. And then over the weekend, while my wife was gone, one of my daughter's volleyball friends invited her over for a sleepover, which resulted in another incident where my daughter forgot to take a charger for her phone. Her phone died. She had no way to contact me and didn't think to ask any her friends' parents to contact me. She couldn't remember my phone number, but her parents had my number, but she didn't think to ask them. So when I arrived at our prearranged pickup time the next day, nobody was home. They had decided to go play volleyball and get something to eat, but I never got the memo. And my daughter didn't think to inform them that maybe they should contact me first to let me know that there was a change of plans, because apparently they didn't know what the plans were. So I guess she just figured it would all work out. And it did ultimately, but it took me waiting an hour for them to get back. So in the aftermath of all of that madness, there's some personal safety lessons that I wanted to share this week. The first is related to your finances. And this is something that if you go back to some of the older episodes with Aaron Israel prior to episode, I think 139, these are things that this is kind of related to some of the lessons that he taught. And one of those is to make sure that you have an emergency fund. Make sure that you have the wherewithal to do something like we had to do at the last minute. You need to put a family member or you yourself need to get on a plane and fly to help take care of family who are sick or dying or whatever. You need to have the financial wherewithal to do that. And so make sure that when you do your budget, I guess that's another piece of advice is to have a budget, but make sure that part of your budget includes an emergency fund to cover this kind of thing, and that you have a plan to replenish that fund if and when you ever have to use it. The second sort of personal safety and security lesson that I have for you would be, if you are on a prescribed medication, don't stop taking it. Don't change it without consulting your physician, especially if it's something that you've been prescribed and have been taking for a while. This was the cause of my mother-in-law's seizures. You know, we often think about what effect a medication might have in interacting with other existing medications, but we rarely think about what stopping a medication might do, what effect that might have. Your physician prescribed your medications to you for a reason, and if you don't think you need it anymore, you need to ask them first before you quit cold turkey. And then I guess that would bring you to the third lesson, which would be if you are on a prescribed medication and it's something that you absolutely need to take regularly, make sure that you don't run out. Always make sure that you have plenty on hand, that you have extra if you need, that you have a plan to automatically refill those medications so that, let's say you go on a trip. Let's say at the very last minute, you have to go fly across the country to take care of sick relatives. If you're low on medication, you need to make sure that you have enough to get you through whatever that trip is. Again, you don't know what effect simply stopping the medication, even if it's a short-term stop, but stopping cold turkey, if it's something that you take regularly, not something you want to do, you need to contact your physician first. What what are we up to now? Third, fourth? I had these numbered and then I thought of a couple of others. So I'm out of my numbering is a little off here. I think this is third. No, this is fourth. Commit your loved one's phone numbers to memory, or at the very least, keep a written copy of their numbers handy. This was an issue in both of those incidents that I talked about earlier, one with my family members trying to contact me, and with my daughter trying to or not trying to contact me. Not being able to contact me because she couldn't remember my phone number. She has it programmed in her phone. And this is one of the great things about the phones that we carry around every day. They store so much information that we forget that we don't think about what would happen if the phone dies. What would happen if we don't have access to that information? Do you know where you are? Do you have the address of the places where you go? Do you know how to get from place to place without a map? Do you have the phone numbers of your emergency contacts committed to memory or accessible some other way and, written down somewhere? So make sure that you have all of that stuff, especially when it comes to kids. Walk through with them what to do if the unexpected occurs. What if plans change? What if your friends are drinking or using drugs? What if someone gets hurt? What if your phone dies and you need to reach us, but you can't because your phone's dead? Obviously, I need to do some more work in this area. I bet many of you do too. So that's why I thought I would bring that up. Fifth is to keep a cool head under pressure. And this is easier said than done with many people, but it's an important skill, and partly it's baked into your personality, but your ability to handle pressure and to keep calm. Like I said, it's partly a result of your psychological makeup, and changing things may not be easy, but there are things that you can do to sort of train yourself to respond calmly in dangerous situations, difficult situations, stressful situations. When my wife was watching her mom fall into a seizure, all she could think to do was to scream for help. I looked up the phone number for the hospital and got them on the stick. Now, part of that is our emotional makeup, our psychological makeup is a little bit different, but there are things, because your emotions can override your calm demeanor. So practicing situations that simulate stress can help you when you face a stressful situation in real life. So make sure you run fire drills at home. Make sure you go through what to do in this situation and that situation. What if somebody's trying to break in the door? What if there's a car accident? Look up Grant Cunningham's book, Prepping for Life. It's on the Armed Lutheran shop, by the way. Sit down and make a list of some of the situations that you're most likely to find yourself in, and game plan how to deal with them and talk that through with your family. That way, when that stressful situation arises, you have that sort of mental preparation to fall back on that can help you overcome the emotion and the stress. Playing time-based games, even video games that simulate some stress, or competing in sports like competitive shooting where you're under that timer. People think that's no big deal. You're just running around shooting at targets. It looks like a lot of fun. It is, but when that buzzer goes off, you get something that we like to call buzzer brain. And if you haven't thought through what it is you're going to do on that stage, as soon as the buzzer goes off, all of your confidence kind of goes out the window, and you're just, you're winging it. So if you plan and prepare for stressful situations, that can help when a real stressful situation occurs. And finally, I have no idea what number this is at this point. And this is related partly to the situation with my daughter, but set up emergency contacts in your phone. We talked a minute ago about how amazing these things are that we carry around, how much information that they store. But we don't think about, well, what do you do if you lose it? What happens if you lose it and somebody finds it? What happens if you're hurt and someone assisting you and you're non-responsive and somebody needs to contact your family? That information can be retrieved from your phone without unlocking it in an emergency. I'm not sure how you do it with iPhone. I'm not going to go through that. I will include a link in the show notes to explain, but I know with an Android phone, for example, you can tap on the main screen where it says emergency, and you'll get emergency information about the phone's owner. You can add allergy or medication info, health concerns, blood types, emergency contacts, so that all they have to do is tap on that contact and it will dial that number. I would recommend not putting your address in there because anybody who finds your phone can get your address. But at the very least, you should have your emergency contact numbers. And I can tell you from personal experience that this works. I think it was last year or maybe the year before, we attended a Dallas Stars game, and my phone apparently slipped out of my pocket and ended up in the floor under my seat, and I didn't even realize it. And my wife got a phone call from a nice lady who found the phone and knew to do this, knew to look to see if there were any emergency contacts. And she called my wife and said, "Hey, I found this phone." Before we even got to the escalators on the level where our seats were, we had a phone call telling us, "Hey, we'll meet you and bring you your phone." So that's an important tip that everybody should consider, and you maybe don't think about it, but do it. Include be sure to go in and program in your at the very least, your emergency contacts in your phone. I'll include links in the show notes to articles that describe how to set this up in your phone, whether it's iPhone or Android. So look for that in the show notes. All right. I think that's all I have for today. I hope this has been helpful. Again, thank you for all of those of you who reached out and expressed your concerns and your well wishes and thoughts and prayers. I really do appreciate it. And thanks be to God. Mother-in-law is doing well, back to normal, and back at home. And wife is home safe and sound, and things are sort of back to normal. And so next week, I think, is, if we can squeeze it in, it's going to be, I usually like to have more time to plan these things, but ideally next week we will have an online hangout for the Reformation Gun Club. If you would like to come join us, please do go to armedlutheran.us/gun club and sign up and come join us. If you'd like to see what those hangouts are like, they're a lot of fun. Check out our YouTube channel and you can see the videos of past hangouts. These are not done live, by the way. These are we record them and then post them on our YouTube channel after the fact. So be sure to go and check that out at armedlutheran.us/YouTube, or you can just search for Armed Lutheran on the YouTube page, and be sure to subscribe and check it out. Come join us for the online hangout. I'll be announcing that later as well, if it hasn't been announced by the time this episode comes out. Whatever we do next, whether it's an online hangout or whether it's Clinging to God and Guns, the planned show that we never got to record with Pastor Bennett. Until then, keep shooting, keep praying. We'll talk to you next time.
For show notes, be sure to visit our website at www.armedlutheran.us. Check out the Facebook page, The Armed Lutheran, or join our Facebook group, Fans of Armed Lutheran Radio. If you like what you hear, please leave us a comment on our feedback page at armedlutheran.us/feedback, or a review on iTunes, and let us know what you think. Thank you for listening to Armed Lutheran Radio, a member of the Self-Defense Radio Network.